Welcome to this wonderful podcast. And today we have a very interesting guest with us, who's Dylan. And Dylan, in this podcast, we start with a quick introduction before we get into the really funny things we're going to talk about today. So how about that?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Dylan Garrity. I'm originally from Austin, Texas. I am now a communication coach. I basically help busy professionals become more clear, efficient, confident speakers. Before this, for around 7 years, I was an ESL teacher. Then I transitioned to business coaching for non-native speakers, helping them prepare for pitch decks, international events. And then in the last year, I've switched to communication coaching pretty much full time. So that's who I am.
Pretty impressive. So today, of course, our discussion is based on humor and really understanding how somebody can go from not being naturally funny to becoming someone who is able to be more charismatic and funny. So I want to ask you this. When did you sort of realize that you were funny?
So for me, when I was a child, I realized very early on if I could make my parents laugh or if I could make people laugh, it gave me social capital. So I was practicing and trying to tell jokes since I was a very, very little kid. And at first, obviously, I can remember from like 5 to 7, 5 to 9, I was making jokes all the time. And my parents were like, okay, you're making an effort, but you're not really, like, you're kind of missing the mark. And it was just a long process of just iterating.
I think the obvious question comes that how do you even make a joke land?
So if we're getting into the science of it, the best explanation I've ever seen, or the best framework I've ever seen for something being funny is it's a combination of it's something called a benign violation. A joke is funny because it violates either our social norms, it violates our expectations, or it violates a pattern that we set up. That's why we have the pace. That's why usually jokes have a pattern of 3. Like, went to the store, I bought some food, I got hit by a car. That surprise at the end is where that violation at the end of what we were expecting is where the joke lies. The benign part is that we have to perceive that violation as non-harmful or as amusing. So, for example, if I was telling a joke, I was like, oh my God, I was so mad at my friend, I wanted to feed him to a bear. You see that that's not actually a harmful intention. But if I say I was so mad at my friend, I was thinking about stabbing him, it's not a joke anymore.
I guess so.
Yeah.
But then where does dark humor lie in this whole territory?
So dark humor is every violation is permissible so long as it respects the group that you're in. If you feel safe with a group of people, if people know that they are safe with you, there's almost no limit to the dark humor so long as you're respecting the sentiment of the group.
Okay.
The only problem is when you go past what's acceptable for the group, in which case that's your mistake. You failed. You're part of the responsibility of being the person telling the joke is you have to read the room and respect people's boundaries and respect the people around you.
Okay. So I think my next question to you is that where are jokes really appropriate? Like, let's say you're in a professional work environment. A lot of people hesitate to tell jokes, even though it can sort of calm the tension. So where, according to you, is a joke appropriate and where probably it might not be as appropriate? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very, very dangerous thing to say, okay, jokes are appropriate here, they're not appropriate here. I mean, there's no situation where you can say in all cases you shouldn't tell a joke or this behavior is inappropriate, right? I've been at funerals and everybody was really crying and then somebody made a joke about the deceased person and it reminded us of the deceased person. It was a moment being shared, right? I've got job interviews because I was funny. There's never ever a place where he says this, you never tell a joke in this particular context.
Okay.
The only thing is when you have to respect the needs of the group and the situation you're in. If you can tell that nobody's in a joking mode and you're like, haha, but I'm going to contribute. That's when you shouldn't tell the joke.
Okay. So depending on the moment and again the environment as well. That's fair. And like, let's say you're somebody who has never had any experience with humor. How could you build that humor? Because you said that you started as a child, but let's say over here you are, say, a 30, 35-year-old man. And how can you build your humor as someone who's...
The first step is to understand why you want to build the humor.
Okay.
Do you want to build the humor, or do you want to build that skill because it's something you admire in other people, or because you think you will get social benefits from it? It's sort of like going after a really nice car. If you want the car because you would love to drive that car, fine. But if you're just like, I want the car because it'll give me social status, or I want to be funny because it'll give me social status, don't waste your time. If that's the wrong reason to pursue it. I loved comedians, and I loved when people could tell jokes, and I love laughing. So that's something a skill I wanted to develop. If your intentions are, I love this skill, I'm just not good at it, the first step I would do is I would focus as much as I could on exposure to different types of humor. Then the first easiest step I would engage in is trying to imagine funny scenarios. It could be slapstick. This is a really, Ryan Reynolds is very good at this. So he was telling a story about Denzel Washington. They were doing a movie together. Denzel Washington came to visit him, and he was like, I was panicking. I had to rip down the posters of Denzel Washington I had all over the walls. That's an amusing situation. So if you practice thinking of what would be funny in this situation and what's an amusing situation that could happen here, even if it's just something silly like, oh, I did a job interview and I slipped on a banana peel. Just trying to picture absurd situations will break the ice. The next one is just funny descriptions of people. One really easy formula I found for telling a joke is you think about a person you want to tease or make fun of, then you think of what it reminds you of, and then you think of an amusing adjective that could fit that description. So, for example, if we talk about, not to get too political, but we talk about Donald Trump, he always kind of stands like this, right? With this kind of strange body posture.
Yeah.
So, for me, when I first saw that, I thought, okay, what does that look like? And to me, it looks like he stands like an ostrich. So I have what he looks like in the middle. So then I have to think of something, just one word that would be funny. So Donald Trump stands like a constipated ostrich. That's the joke right there. It's a very easy formula just to get practice in.
Okay. So this is called slapstick comedy. This formula that you said, it's called slapstick comedy.
No, slapstick is like slipping on a banana peel. It's physical comedy. This is just a simple form of description.
Descriptive comedy. Fine.
Yeah.
What other ways are there?
There's lots of different forms of comedy. There's irony, and if you would like, there's a complete list that I find very useful. I can't remember all of them now, but if you would like, I can send you the link and you can include it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description. That's not an issue.
But for example, one of them is irony. So I read an example in the list I mentioned. It was alcoholic father turns to the bottle after his son becomes addicted to marijuana. It's like, or alcoholic father disappointed in pot smoking son. It's like,
That is definitely interesting. I think, but out of all of this humor, one thing that I dislike is sarcastic humor. In fact, for a long time, to fit into groups, I used to really implement sarcasm whenever I spoke, and in the long run, it did not serve me. So what are your thoughts on sarcasm?
I kind of disagree with you. It's never the tool, it's how you use it. I use sarcasm all the time. My humor is very dry, and you can use it as a compliment as much as an insult. So if I was talking about your content or your presentation, I could be like, oh yeah, you really lack sincerity. You are a very sincere, like, direct communicator.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can use sarcasm also. I don't know if you're the kind of person who's comfortable receiving compliments.
I am, I guess so. I am.
So sometimes what I'll do, if somebody's like, I know somebody, like I've got a friend, he's a bodybuilder, he's in fantastic shape.
Okay.
If you give him a compliment, he wilts like a flower. He cannot handle it. So the only way I can kind of get around that and let him know, dude, you're making progress, is to come in with sarcasm. There's never a problem with the tool. It's just when and how you're using it.
How do you use it in that case?
So he's quite muscular, and he's just like, he's like, I don't feel really good about myself. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're small as hell. You're just a weak man. It's clear it's not the case, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of snaps him out of that idea of like,
and it sort of breaks the tension as well. Like when someone's feeling a little bit down, it kind of makes them laugh and cheer up.
So I mean, and it sounds so like my question for you would be like, you used it a lot, but it was like for you an unhealthy coping mechanism. It sounds like
could be, yeah. I mean, see, as a kid, I used to get bullied a lot, and most of the bullies used to use a lot of sarcasm. So I thought, in order to fit into the group, let me also try using more sarcasm, and it kind of became this leech in my personality because I used it negatively, of course. In fact, today was the first time I learned that you can also use it positively, which is an interesting take.
Okay.
So yeah, I think you're right. It's not the tool, it's rather the implementation. Also, I've heard that when someone tries to build their humor, sometimes there's a lot of trauma also involved. In fact, I've heard this quote where it says that life is a tragedy if you look up close, but if you zoom out a bit, then it's a comedy. Have you heard that?
I have heard that, and I think it's absolutely true. And I think that most of the comedians I'm aware of, and I know for myself, humor is a coping mechanism, and it does come from trauma.
Okay. Like, how, if you wanted to get into that, like, what trauma actually caused humor as a response, rather?
So my father was an abusive alcoholic, and it was, as you can imagine, it was very difficult to deal with. There is always a temptation with trauma to turn it into a dramatic story. I don't know if you've met I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but when you get hurt and when you are damaged in some way, it is very easy to turn it into an epic narrative of like, you don't know what it's like to be abused in that way. And you can turn it into an ego state, and it can really trap you. But when you turn it into humor, it removes some of that power.
That does make sense. I think when you talked about this, it kind of reminded me of my own life where at a point of time, I did use it as ego. So like my parents are divorced, and even I had a lot of trauma over there. But I kind of thought that, a lot of successful people also have trauma. So that means that I'm going to be super successful because of my trauma. That kind of boosted my ego. But I think what I really needed was some healing rather than getting obsessed and maybe making it more dramatic than it should be. That does make sense. Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, and I think an interesting aspect of trauma is it's very easy to it makes you feel special in a way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get addicted to that. They're like, I've been hurt, and I don't want to lose the version of myself that got hurt, so I will hold on to this. And I know I did that for many years. Yeah.
But what happens when you kind of let go of those things?
So I heard a really great, and then I'm gonna tie this back into humor in 1 second. So I heard a really great. Are you familiar with Gabor Mate?
Sorry?
Are you familiar with Gabor Mate?
No, I do not.
I think he's a psychologist. He's some sort of doctor, but he's talked a lot about psychology and development. And what he talked about was humans always have this desire, these two desires that are pulling us in two different directions. The desire for connection. If we don't have connection, if we don't have other people, we die. That's how it is. We're designed to be in tribes. We're pack animals. Then the desire for unique self-expression. And trauma is always us sabotaging ourselves or hurting ourselves so that we can continue to fit into the group. Humor is how I used humor initially was I felt like I wasn't valuable enough on my own so humor was a way for me to establish connection with other people and to prove my value to a group.
Okay. Yeah. I think for most people that is how it is, because we feel very disassociated with society where other people come from healthier families, healthier backgrounds, and there's a part of us who can't really relate to that, and that's why we want to gain that social currency through humor.
Absolutely.
It makes a lot of sense. But I think then I want to dive into self-deprecating humor, because a lot of people, they have this thing in their mind where they say, if I make a joke about somebody else, they might feel bad. Let me make a joke about myself, but that kind of also reduces your self-esteem, right? So what are your thoughts on self-deprecating humor?
Yet again, it's about the tool. It's not the tool, it's how you use it. For example, when I was an English teacher, a lot of my clients would come to me and they'd feel really stupid because their English wasn't perfect.
Okay.
And the first thing I would do within the first 10 minutes be like, okay, if you feel stupid, would you like to switch to us speaking your language very quickly? And I would kind of make a fool of myself, and then that gave them permission to make mistakes. Self-deprecating humor can also be very valuable in a situation where you want to establish equality between people, right? So, for example, if we were to talk about a political issue in India, it would be very easy for me to, if I ask you the questions the wrong way, it could sound very patronizing, like, America. Oh my God, we have Walmart. It would be very easy to come in with that kind of attitude. So if I come in and say, okay, what's happening in India around this political issue, and then make it clear, not like I can judge you if you look at the politics in the US, it's mocking my own country and putting us on an even playing field.
Okay.
That being said, you can also use self-deprecating humor, and I've certainly used this, to keep yourself small. So I realized when I was 21, 22, 23, if I acted like I'm a dumb little boy trying my best, I could gain social capital because everybody's like, he's cute and he's trying. Now I'm 33, I've realized I cannot use that anymore. It worked when I was in my early 20s. Now if I ever use that, I am lowering myself far past what I deserve. You can use self-deprecating humor to keep yourself small so that other people don't have expectations of you, and that can really hurt you. Or you can use it, or you can make self-deprecating humor, like I used to joke all the time how stupid I was, and then people would start to treat me like I was stupid. So it always is a question of use the tool. If it gives you benefits, great. If it stops giving you the benefits you want, abandon it.
I think that makes sense. And I think also with self-deprecating humor, only use it on things you're not insecure about, like you're 100% secure about that and you make a joke on that just to level the playing field. I think that's better. Because if I was to say make a joke about my pimples, subconsciously that might hurt me because I have like really oily skin and I sometimes hate the way it just pops up. So yeah, just making jokes about your strengths rather than things that you are a little bit insecure about might help.
Do you not feel, though, that you can also use self-deprecating humor to take that power away from it as well, or no?
I mean, I've definitely tried that. But what happens is when you again try to use the jokes you're insecure about, other people also catch on to that. And if somebody else makes a joke on your insecurity, it hurts like twice the amount. So as you said, right, in your is when you were trying to really explore communication, you were trying to talk to more people, and somehow people's perception of you also sort of changed. So again, people's perception also matters, especially when we are being vulnerable with insecurities. I think it's better to tell it in a form of a story or something to help it lose power, but making a joke on it might make it worse. At least that's what I feel.
No, I can definitely see that. If you, by making self-deprecating humor, you're kind of giving permission to other people to poke at it, that can be... No, I think you've got a good point there.
And then I want to understand that a lot of people also use humor as an excuse to be rude. Have you ever experienced that?
You can say anything if you're just joking, right? And for me, it always comes back to the intention of the person behind it. I've made jokes where my intentions were completely pure, but I realized I'd said something quite hurtful. And I've made jokes in situations where I was trying to be mean. And it always comes back to what was the intent behind it. And then if somebody is doing that to you, the most powerful things you can do is just call it out.
So you were
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you were saying if somebody is doing that to you, what?
If somebody's doing that to you, I mean, There's lots of ways to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the easiest forms of defense is just ask them to explain the joke. Yeah. So if I could use you in this example, and I was like, ha ha ha, pimply sumit, you just said, Dylan, could you please? What do you mean by that? It forces me, before I could pretend it was a joke, and now I have to go, I was trying to hurt you, which does not make me look good.
That makes sense. This is actually a very interesting take on things. And I think if somebody is finding themselves in situations where they're getting bullied and people are just saying it's just a joke, sort of asking them to explain themselves can work in their favor. It's definitely interesting. And also when it comes to humor, I want to really know that when somebody makes a joke, and suppose you don't get it, if I make a joke and you don't get it, then sort of explaining the joke can also feel weird, right? Like over here, we're not talking about the bullying thing. Let's say that I'm just genuinely trying to be more funny and exploring my humorous side. What can I do when my jokes don't land, when someone doesn't understand it?
First of all, that's always going to happen.
Okay.
That's just a rite of passage. If you're trying to be funny, you're going to make a joke sometimes and people aren't going to get it. The first step is to not beat up on yourself. Just use it as data. The second step is so either you decide to just say forget about it and you move on, A, or B, you try to explain the joke. If it takes a short amount of time, try to explain the joke. But if you're going to need like 10 seconds or a lot of context, I would just leave it.
Okay. Now I want to ask you, what is the difference between a good joke and a bad joke? Like, according to how it lands.
The difference between a good joke and a bad joke is, there's a lot of ways to think about it. But the difference between the good joke and a bad joke is if it actually lands with the audience, then so Andy Warhol has this great quote of art is getting away with it. I think it's the same for humor. If you tell a joke and people think it's funny enough that nobody's upset, then you got away with it. And that's a good joke. A bad joke is when you either aren't really telling a joke. For example, if I say something racist as a joke and then I'm like, nobody has a sense of humor anymore. That's not on anybody else. That's on me. I failed.
Yeah.
Obviously the difference between a good joke is whether it works or not with your audience.
Okay. Fine. And how does tonality kind of play a picture while telling a joke? Because sometimes the joke might be really funny, but it's the way you say it that may or may not land. So what are your observations on that?
I think tonality is very interesting because that is a very, very, very personal range and skill set. So for me, I'm quite dry with my humor. So people will often not understand that I'm joking a lot at first because they'll say something and I will respond with a joke, but I will just use this tone. So it's some people are just very dry. Some people are quite, my God, it depends on the energy and range that you're comfortable with. And obviously matching the tone to the humor. Matching the tone to the joke is important. And I think sometimes it's one of the hardest things to do when you are trying to be funny is you are either telling like a knock-knock joke with way too much excitement. Knock-knock. It's like, oh, God. Or you're not coming at it with a nut up. So you're like, got a funny. So knock-knock. It's like, okay. Both things. The first one is like, okay, are you going to eat me? The second one is like, okay, are you a wounded bird?
Yeah.
I think one of the best strategies you can do if you're struggling with tonality is record yourself or just practice in a mirror.
Okay.
So just trying to, I think, and maybe you'll disagree with me on this. I'd be very curious about your opinion on this. I personally think that who you present and how you feel are two completely different things.
Who you present and how you feel.
So who you are presenting to people. So it is kind of our responsibility to wear a mask for other people. So if I go into the office and I'm angry and I'm having a bad day, it is my responsibility to put on a mask for everybody else and not say, okay, I'm having a bad day, therefore everyone's going to suffer. So when you are trying to be funny, you have to practice in the mirror, practice at home, having the fun, relaxed energy or whatever energy you need to have for that joke to convey.
I get that. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people don't take that responsibility seriously. Like, especially over here, the work culture is if somebody is really annoyed and they're having a bad day and they're in like a senior level, they will make sure that the entire team has a bad day. I think there is a little bit of entitlement when it comes to that. But yeah, I think with humor also you have to have a little bit of a, I wouldn't call it a mask, maybe fine tuning it a bit, because when people hear the word mask, they're like, oh, but I have to be authentic. I don't feel like myself anymore. But rather practicing to fine tune to make sure that joke lands, because I think with jokes also, one thing I've seen with a lot of comedians in their interviews is once a joke lands, they sort of repeat that joke in almost every interview. Is that something you have also experienced? Like, if you find some jokes that you really love, you try to use it in more and more conversations?
So hold on, there's I want to go back to 2 points there. So first, when you are trying to be funny or when you're trying to grow in any way, you will feel like a fake at first. There's no escaping that. I mean, the first time you're learning to present, the first time you're learning to tell a joke, you cannot do it authentically because your insides are going. So you have to fake it at first. So and overcoming that barrier, eventually you're not faking it anymore, or you're faking it much less. The second thing of just repeating or reusing a joke, you get addicted to jokes and how it makes you feel, and then you can just find yourself on a loop. Like I try to always open doors for people if I'm in a public setting, and every time I open for doors, they would say thank you, and I say my good deed for the year. The first time I said it, it was spontaneous. The 474th time I said it, it was just
scripted.
Yeah, scripted, push button for dopamine. You know what I mean? It's like, and what I found for myself is when you start to feel bored in who you're performing for other people, you have the choice. You can either keep trying to push that button and refuse growth, or you can say, this no longer serves me. It doesn't make me happy. And then you have to abandon it and replace it with something else.
That makes sense. And I think when it comes to humor, also reading social cues is quite important. So how do you do that? Like, because I have personally sometimes struggled with social cues when I am really energetic or excited to share something. I don't really care how the room feels. I'm always like, oh, I really need to tell this. So what are your thoughts on social cues?
So social cues are, especially with humor, and this goes back to faking it. This is the point I wanted to make. Social cues are very, very important. And I think it's giving yourself time to feel the room. And I'm curious how you do this. So I feel like what happened, so for me, my process is, let's say I'm going to a social function. I am with people, and my first thing that I'm focusing on is people's facial expressions, how nervous they are, and how tense the room is, or how much people are trying to connect, or how much friction and awkwardness there is. If you are in that place and everybody's sort of tense and awkward, it might be a time for a joke, it might not. I mean, just so if I go into a room and I feel like everybody's sort of just like, I can be like, wow, everybody feels so comfortable right now. Might help in some circumstances. If people are recognizing that there's awkwardness, it might not. You just have to be paying attention to the facial expressions, the body language of the people around you, and you are always trying to not insult or alienate people. You're just trying to create something where you're creating a shared experience.
That is fair.
One thing that's always very difficult too, and I still struggle with this to this day, if you want to start joking and you want to start telling jokes that violate the social norms, you're going to feel like a faker every time. When I'm like, I don't know if this joke is going to land, it becomes a nervous thing, and I have to put on that ego for a second. Usually now, because I have enough experience, the joke lands. But there's always that moment if you have to step outside of your comfort zone and say, I'm going to take a risk on saying this thing that I think will be funny.
I get that. And I think with me also, I do something similar. But rather than having jokes that I always use, I kind of sort of rely on my wit. Like whenever the moment calls for it and see that, oh, I can do this, I can just add this one line which will make people laugh. So I try to do that. Have you also worked on your wittiness?
Not sure I understand the difference between a joke and wit.
Like, see, a joke is something that you might script or you might really think about for a while, but wittiness is something that happens on cue. Like, if somebody asks you a question and you kind of want to make the audience laugh, you would say something funny over there, and that takes some practice to come, right? Because sometimes we have days where after the conversation has passed and after a few hours, we're like, oh, I should have said this there. But like when you have a strong sense of wit over there, then you're able to say it in the moment.
For me, I feel I don't distinguish between the two. A joke it can be rehearsed, but are you familiar? But telling a joke in response to something you said is, for me, so like if the question is how do you develop wit, is this what you're saying?
Yeah.
So once again, benign violation. So going back to, if you don't mind, so when I said the whole pimply submit thing, that was, see right here, that it's a violation, right? Yeah. I feel like I assume you feel safe because you know that I'm not attacking you.
Yes.
But that was wit in response to something that you had said.
Okay.
Yeah. So it has to just be, you are looking for opportunities to violate social norms, expectations, or patterns in a way that makes sense and is not offensive to people. So for example, one example, and sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. So one time I was out with my friend, his girlfriend, and one of their friends, and his girlfriend was a very physically affectionate person. She was like leaning up against him and tickling his chin. And then I was like, okay. And then I leaned against his friend who was sitting next to me and started tickling his chin to like make fun of her. The two guys loved it. They thought it was funny. She was annoyed. So it's just learning how to violate expectations, patterns, or social norms.
Okay. So I think now a very interesting question, since for a while we have discussed how to develop your wit, how to be more humorous. Why do you think AI is not able to replicate humor? Like whenever I ask Google to tell me a joke, it gives me one of the worst knock-knock jokes that makes me cry instead of laugh. So why do you think that is?
Why do I think AI cannot replicate human wit?
Not only human wit, humor in general.
And I do not know. I wish I could answer you. I don't have any response to that. I'm assuming if you pushed it enough, it would be able to tell jokes. And I've heard people use AI to tell jokes.
Are they funny though?
Huh?
Are they funny? The jokes?
The things I've seen that are funniest from AI are when it makes mistakes. But I've never experienced a joke that made me laugh because AI wrote it. But to be fair, I despise AI. I'm quite biased in that way, so I wouldn't acknowledge something as funny from AI. Even if I did, probably I would try to be honest, but I would struggle.
That. I mean, maybe AI is too perfect, and when it is so perfect, humor requires that surprise, and surprise can come from errors. And I think that's what humans can do, which maybe AI can't. Who's your favorite comedian that you really look up to?
Oh God, there's so many, and it really. So for me, and I would say this to any. He was especially good. I admired him a lot, and he really helped me understand when I was younger how to talk to women in a flirtatious way. Is Craig Ferguson?
Okay. Because
he's great comedian. I don't like his comedy so much, but his TV show, he was fantastic at setting up jokes, setting up and building connection. But there's many people I admire. John Mulaney. Who else? Oh gosh, there's so many. But of course, obviously, now that you've asked me, I can't think of them. Let's see. Dude, I There's
Okay.
many I admire. I can, but none
No,
of them
that's
are
fine.
coming to mind
That's
right now.
totally fine. And do you also feel the pressure to deliver as someone who comes from, say, a humorous background? And when you are the funny guy, do you feel that pressure to always live up to those expectations?
I feel enormous pressure sometimes to live up to those expectations. That is partially because of my own trauma, which tells me that if I'm not constantly contributing, people will abandon me. That pushes me to force the joke more than is healthy. The other thing, and I have had the feeling of, okay, now I've been the jokester the entire evening. I have to continue being the jokester. And that is exhausting. And I've been working very hard for quite some time now to not keep that expectation of myself. If I tell a joke and I'm being that person, great. But I also give myself full permission to be like, I don't feel like joking anymore.
So I think my final question to you would be that if you could, for a moment, remove your humorous mask and not be the funny guy, who would you be?
Oof, that's an interesting question. I've got a lot of masks, man. So if I was removing the humor, I think I'm a very sincere person.
Okay.
And I'm very analytical, and I can be quite negative sometimes. So I would be, those things are expressed in me now, but they are sort of cushioned by the humor. And if I removed the humor, I would have to develop new ways to express that stuff without it, while synchronizing with the people around me.
Okay. I think that was a very beautiful way to put that.
Thank you.
And yeah, this has been a very interesting discussion. Anything you would like to add before we wrap up?
So for you, like, it feels like, so with what is your relationship with wits? Like, how have you approached it? It feels like for you kind of developed an unhealthy relationship. Is that shifting now or not really?
It has shifted. And I think for me, humor comes when I feel really excited. So like if I'm coaching someone or if I'm on stage, suddenly my brain is like, hey, why don't you tell a joke here? People will enjoy it and people are also watching you. So I think that's when the humor naturally comes to me. But in day-to-day conversations, it may not evoke as much, but definitely I've dropped the sarcasm now. I know that it does not work in my favor. In fact, when I was just beginning with my communication journey, I had this mentor from Switzerland. His name was Eric Bergman. And he really taught me that sarcasm can really end up in you can really end up in bad situations because of sarcasm, because people may not take it well. Like, you're expecting people to understand the joke, right? And today you've also shown me a new perspective on that. But yeah, I would say it's much healthier, my relationship with humor. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha, man. All right, cool. All right. Okay, interesting. Well, interesting. All right. My last question for you would be, like, I find that different tools work very well for different people, and I'm curious what your perspective is on this with humor and everything else. So, for example, one person I really love, one communication coach I really love, is Jefferson Fisher, and he says you should never curse around other people unless you're angry, because if you are cursing all the time, you can't escalate it. If you're quite upset, you can't escalate your form of communication. And for me, I feel like it works great for him, but it doesn't work for me. I curse all the time as a form of joking. I curse all the time as a form of connection. I use foul language constantly.
Thank God this video is not getting demonetized.
Yeah, there we go. Haven't used it yet. We'll keep it kosher. But so my question for you is, I would say that I don't think everybody should be trying to actually pursue a form of humor or trying to be funny. I think it should be very much whether you're called to it or not. And you shouldn't also be trying to pursue all forms of humor. You should just be trying to find what works for your personality and your...
Yeah. I think humor is a lot like public speaking as a whole as well, right? So just like there are types in humor, there's a lot of types in public speaking. You can either be that loud, energetic, motivational speaker, or you can be someone who's really calm and whose presence is something that really shoos away anxiety. So whatever you think is right to you kind of helps out, because there is no one way to be funny, or there is no one way to become a good communicator. So yeah, I think adapt is my life motto, and that's what I do. That's what most people do, and that's what works out.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
All right, man. Well, I don't know if it's it. I really appreciate you taking the time and having me on here.
Yeah, and we have definitely had a very insightful conversation, and hope the audience watching at home was able to come up with a joke or two. And if you came up with a joke, definitely write it down in the comments. We would love to read them. Thank you for watching. So I will see you in another great podcast.